Hi, my name is Christina Gravert. I'm an Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Copenhagen. I'm also the co-founder of Impactually, a behavioral science consultancy. In all of my work, I work under the assumption that people have good intentions. We want to live healthy lives, we want to save for retirement, we want to be productive at work, and we want to protect our environment. But unfortunately, often life gets in the way. We don't do the things that we had actually planned to do. Instead of going to the gym and eating a healthy salad, we end up on the couch watching Netflix and having a frozen pizza. What fascinates me about working with behavioral science is to understand the gap between our intentions and our actions. Why is it that it's so hard to live up to our good intentions? By now, there's plenty of research that shows that our decisions are influenced by our environment. As humans, we often take decisions that are the easiest. But the problem is that these easy decisions are not always the ones that are in our long-run best interest. So let me tell you an example. A couple of years ago, I did an experiment at a restaurant in Sweden. We wanted to understand whether placing vegetarian food at the top of the menu would increase its demand. In order to test this, we designed two different menus. One was a vegetarian dish on top, and the other was a meat dish on top. We then randomly distributed these menus across the restaurant. We then recorded what people ordered and could back out the effect of the menu order. If people were fully rational and really knew what they wanted, we shouldn't see any differences. But this is not what we found. We found that the people who received the vegetarian dish on top were 15% more likely to order the vegetarian dish. Out of those who received the meat on top, only 3% ordered vegetarian. What we're doing here is that we're nudging people to either choose more meat or more vegetarian based on how the menu is presented to them. By making one of the choices more salient, it just makes it a little bit easier to order one or the other dish. The nice thing with nudging is that it just makes it a little bit easier to choose the right thing. We're not taking away any of the choices, so we're not taking meat off the menu, but we're just making it a little bit easier to choose a vegetarian dish. We're also not changing the price, so we wouldn't put a tax on any of the options to make them more expensive. This gives people still the freedom to choose what they actually want, but it makes the choice that is good for themselves in the long run, society, or the environment a little bit easier. So let's imagine now you think that nudging could be a great addition to your toolkit of changing behavior. How do you get started? So in my work, I meet a lot of people who think nudging is interesting, but they don't really know how to apply it to their daily work. For that reason, my co-founder and I at Impactually developed the Boost model. The Boost model is a process that helps you step-by-step design nudges that actually work. So I use the Boost model when we try to encourage people to take more public transport, to get kids in schools to reduce their food waste, to increase charitable donations to charities, or even to get pregnant women in South Africa to take their prenatal vitamins. The nice thing about knowing this process is that you can apply it to any possible behavior change you might be interested in. So how would you use the Boost model in your daily work? As an example, let me walk you through to one of the studies I did where we tried to encourage pregnant women in South Africa to take their prenatal vitamins. I'm now going to take you step by step through the model to give you that as an example so you can apply it in your daily work. The B in the Boost model stands for behavior, and that's the first thing you need to do. You need to define which behavior you want to change. When I work with a lot of leaders, I notice that they often work on high-level goals, such as improving maternal health. But we can't nudge people to be more healthy. We can only nudge them to take behaviors or actions that make them more healthy in the long run. So we need to break down these higher-level goals to individual behaviors that we can actually nudge. In our case, that might be washing your hands regularly or showing up for doctor's appointments, or the behavior we actually chose, which was to take iron supplements every single day. Once you get clear on the behavior you can then move on to the next step. The next step in BOOST is an O, which stands for obstacle. And this is actually the most important step. Now, I know it might often seem urgent that you want to come up with an intervention really quickly. But in this step, we actually want to think about what is it really that stands in the way of behavior change? What are the obstacles that are keeping people from carrying out the behavior that we think would be beneficial for them? At this stage, you might want to do some small surveys, you could do some interviews, or you could look at the economic or scientific literature. The important thing is that you really take your time to understand what is standing in the way of carrying out this behavior. In our case, we thought about it might be that women don't know it's important to take the multivitamins, or maybe their clinics aren't giving them out because they don't have them available. But it could also be that they have this information, but just every morning in their daily busy lives, just forget to take them. The third step in the BOOST model is another O. Here, you now get to design the interventions that are meant to address the barriers you identified in the previous step. In our case, we designed text message reminders that we would send to the women in the morning, reminding them to take their pills. We also designed text messages that gave them information about why it's so important to take the pills. So now you might be thinking, well, that doesn't seem very novel or exciting. Aren't nudges supposed to be something out of the box and new? Well, actually, no. I believe, and I think most other scientists would agree, that the best nudges are actually quite boring. The important thing is that the nudge perfectly addresses the barrier that you've previously identified. So, for example, it could be sending a reminder at the right point of time, simplifying a form, or setting the default option to something that you would like people to choose. This is why the second step is so important. If the women were already aware that it was so important to take the prenatal vitamins, then giving them just more information about that wouldn't change their behavior. But if it is that they know this, but still on a hectic day forget to take them, then a reminder can actually help. The next step in the model is an S, which stands for study. So now that we designed different interventions, we want to figure out which ones work to change behavior. Human behavior is complex, and what worked in one situation might not work in another. More often than not, our intuition is going to be wrong. Let me give you an example. Recently, there was a study done on road safety. They put up signs in roads showing how many people had recently died on these parts of the road. These signs were meant to nudge people to drive more carefully. Makes sense, right? But what they actually found is that the signs increased the amount of accidents because people became distracted. To test which of our nudges would actually work to change behavior, we recruited 4,500 women all across South Africa to take part in our experiment. Half of the women randomly received the text messages that on a daily basis reminded them to take their vitamins. The other group received informational text messages that let them know why it's important to take the vitamins. We could then compare which of these messages increased the self-reported adherence. What we found was that the reminders had a positive effect on adherence, but that the information had no additional value. You might not always be able to do a large experiment, but I want you to keep the experimental aspect in mind. Only if we run an experiment can we actually be sure that the nudge had an effect on the behavior. Finally, we come to tailor, which is the T in the BOOST model. In this last step, you now have the results from the experiment, and you can think about which of the nudges is the most cost-effective or the one that can be scaled up. You might also want to go back and think about trying a different intervention, or maybe even trying to nudge a different behavior if it didn't work out as planned. In our case, we realized that the basic reminders were actually more effective than the ones where we had the additional information. And this was great, because the basic reminders were much easier to design than the ones where we needed the health team to help us come up with information. So the nice thing is now the nonprofit can use this information to, going forward, design cost-effective reminders that are going to help the women to take their prenatal vitamins and give them additional health information. Whatever behavior you're trying to change, I really encourage you to use a systematic process. Take your time to think about the barriers to behavior change before you start designing an intervention. When done right, nudging can be a wonderful complement to other types of policy tools. So I believe nudging should be in the toolkit of anyone who works with people and behavior change.